So hello everyone, welcome to the developer course. So I hope you guys still have your Process Maker University login credentials. If you don't, I can send those to you before we do the first lab because it's been a long time. So I hope you guys didn't have any more problems installing the virtual machine. This virtual machine is actually version 3.2.2. So there are a few new features, including web entries and multiple file uploading. So you guys can feel free to check those out. So the login information, if you don't remember for the virtual machine, because I think we sent that to you a long time ago, is just Process Maker with a capital P and a capital M. And so when you log in, you won't exactly see this. You'll see a blank screen with nothing. If you're not familiar with Ubuntu, then you just go ahead and click on Activities and then click on the Firefox web browser in this menu here.
So, Summer?
Yeah.
So I think you're a little ahead of us. We're trying to figure out where you are.
Okay. Are you guys here? Hold on. Come on. Yeah, here?
No, not yet.
Okay.
How do we get there?
You have to open the virtual box, which is under all of these tabs here.
Yeah, we already opened the virtual, but we're getting the server actually.
And you don't see this here?
Yeah, we
have a blue screen.
You have a blue screen?
I think we already get into the server actually, Process Maker's server.
It's not the blue screen. That's what I mean. It's a screen that has the date and time on it. How do we get here? Can we close out of this?
Oh, you have to. Let me see where you are. If you sort of click on the screen and then drag up, let me see if I can log out of here. I think I have to time out again. But if you drag up, then you should get to a login, like the one you just saw on the screen.
We got it. Okay.
Okay.
So Process Maker, capital P, capital M.
Yes.
Okay, we're on a screen that has activities on the top left.
Yep, so go ahead and click on Activities and then go to Firefox.
Excellent.
And let me know when your browser opens.
Yep, it opens.
Okay, do you guys have this favorites or a bookmarks toolbar up here? Because we're going to be using this a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So then I think, yeah, let's head over to Process Maker University right now. And do you guys still have your credentials and everything? I can resend those to you if you forgot any of you.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and log in. And so now that I'm here, I'm going to go under Process Maker 3 Material and then click on Check Out What's New. And that will take me here. And here in this Process Maker 3 certification courses, I'm going to go ahead and click on this arrow so I can select the developer course, or I just clicked on that link and I can come here too. So we're going to be in the developer course this time, and there's way more labs. This course is bit more hands-on than the architect course. I think I just heard wait. Okay, so you got it. Great. So we're going to start off today with web services, and I'm going to give you guys plenty of times to complete these 2 labs here, and using internal web services and using external web services. And then we'll get into the beginning of basic plugin development today, where we'll be setting up the Gulliver script, then creating a new plugin, and then using our new plugin to make some basic changes in Process Maker, like adding a new option to the top menu, adding a new option to the case menu on the left in Process Maker, as well as creating a new role and permission, and then which actually we'll probably be doing tomorrow. And then we'll be adding custom Process Maker functions and a trigger wizard, and as well as altering the plugin database structure using crude files. And I think that's how they're pronounced. I really want to pronounce them crud, but
yeah,
I think it's crude.
The E is silent.
Yeah. So then we'll also start working on the Process Maker REST API. And then we'll go on to developing an external Process Maker application. And the last thing will be advanced administration of a Process Maker server. So according to our schedule, I think we're going to be doing 3 hours today and then 3 hours tomorrow. And then we'll continue on the 19th again. And then that one will run 5 hours. And then the session on the 20th will run also 5 hours, because we have to make up three hours for yesterday. Okay, cool. And if you guys have any changes, just email me and let me know. My schedule's pretty free so far, except for next Wednesday. So just let me know if you have a schedule change. So let's go on to using internal web services here. And so if we go down to this section, Web Services, we can actually click on this link for Process Maker WSDL Web Services just to take a look at what it says. So I'm going to go ahead and open that link in a new tab. So here it takes us to the Process Maker WSDL Web Services page, and it gives us an overview of what we need to do to use WSDL services in Process Maker. So WSDL stands for Web Services Description Language, which is an extension of XML used to define the services a provider will offer to their clients. They also define what parameters are needed to consume a web service and what data is retrieved from that web service. So another thing to note is that it's a prerequisite to have this PHP SOAP library installed, but since that's already a requisite to install Process Maker, SOAP is already installed, so we don't really need to worry about doing anything in order to be able to use the WSDL web services. So if we go down here into Testing Process Maker's WSDL Web Services section, we'll see where we can find a definition of Process Maker's WSDL Web Services. So here, this is just the Process Maker URL with our Process Maker IP address, our workspace name, the language, and the skin. And so what we need to do is, after the skin, tack on this services/WSDL URL, part of the URL, onto our Process Maker URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this /services/WSDL extension, and then I'm going to open up a new tab and then go to Process Maker. So before we can go to that address, we're going to have to log in first. Otherwise, when we copy and paste it after this name of the skin, it's just going to have us log in again. So here I have my IP address, which here is just process maker. Then the name of my workspace, which here is workflow. And by the way, I know I went through that login screen really fast, but it's the username and password is just admin like it was for the training course. So, and please let me know at any time if I need to slow down. I know I can go at lightning speed sometimes. I'm trying to go slower for this course, but
we will.
Yeah, please. So here we have our IP address, which is just process maker. Then we have the name of our workspace, which is workflow. And I think that should be no, this is different from the training course. Most default workspaces are named workflow. For the training course, we had a workspace named after our own name. So this is kind of like a second playground for you guys to work on. The virtual machine is kind of slow. It's really annoying. But this is also a way you can sort of test out your processes if you want to. Here, English, we have the language, which is English, then the skin, which is neoclassic. So here is where we're going to delete cases main here. If I can just get the cursor to go in the right place, which I can't, but that's fine. Then here now I have the URL where I'll be able to see all of the internal web services offered by Process Maker. So after the skin, just make sure it reads /services/WSDL2. And I'm going to hit enter. So here we can find a list of all of the web services. Here we have our first web services, which is login, which I'm going to actually go through later. And it looks like my virtual machine is doing something crazy with the cursor, but that's fine for now. So here we have the login web service. And down here, it's telling us that the parameters to use that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Sorry, he's trying to get to the URL, and I was just directing him to the URL.
Okay, let me know if I need to stop for a second.
Neoclassic/services/WSDL2. Slash.
Slash?
Yeah, slash. Not dash. Look at the URL. Slash.
No. No, it's not working. Typing a dash.
Oh. So, Summer, we're clicking slash on the keyboard, but it's showing up as dash.
As a dash?
Yeah, it's showing up as dash on the VirtualBox.
I honestly could not tell you why. That's never happened to me. I wonder. So you're pressing slash and it's showing up as dash. Have you guys been able to navigate to the wiki page? We might just have to work around that rather than fix it for now, because I couldn't tell you how to fix it.
That's okay. Well, we copy paste the slash from the URL, so we're doing it that way.
Okay, cool.
WSDL2. Okay, we're there.
Okay, great. So this first web service is called login, which my virtual machine's kind of acting up too. It's putting the cursor a line above, or it's highlighting the line above. But anyway, so we have the first one, which is called login. Then the parameters we need are going to be user ID and password. And then when we consume that web service, the response that we get is going to include the status code, the message, the version, and the timestamp. So, and if we scroll down, we'll be able to see more web services that we can consume. We can get a list of the processes in our workspace, the role list, which is what I'm going to show you how to do in a second, a list of groups, and so on. So the first thing that we're going to want to do to be able to consume this web service is to create a new process in Process Maker. So let's go to Process Maker, and I'm going to open Process Maker in a new tab since I don't think, oh yeah, we did go there, but I'm going to keep this open. I want this open still. So I'm going to log in. My username is admin, and the password is also admin, and I'm going to hit login.
You can just click Process Maker on a new tab. Go to a new tab, click plus on the new tab, and then click Process Maker on the left. Process Maker. Keep going, one more. Yeah. And then log in there. What was the login? Admin?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll put it in the middle. Yeah, that'll be good. All right, Summer, sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. I'm more than happy to slow down and pause. So now I'm just going to create a super simple process in order to consume that web service. So I'm going to go and head over to the designer, and then I'm going to hit new. And then this title is going to be web service, and I'm going to include the name of the web service we're going to consume, which is get role list. And I'm going to just leave the description blank. Don't need anything. I'm also going to leave it on no category. And then I'm going to click create.
Okay.
So I get this tutorial here, which is what shows up for every new process, and I just hit quit because I don't need that. So we're going to start off with a start event here, and I'm just going to hit in this quick toolbar task, and then I'm going to drag and drop the task onto the screen. Then from the task, I'm going to go back to the quick toolbar and then add an end event here. And so this is the extent of my process. It's just going to be one task with a start and an end event. So then I'm going to name this task get role list, because that's just what we're going to do. So if we go back to the wiki page for the WSDL web services, and if I scroll up into the table of contents, we can actually also see here a list of web services offered by Process Maker. And if we go down to D to role list, this is where it's going to tell us what we need to use this web service. So in the beginning of this role list section here, it's telling me that what I need as a parameter, which is shown under parameters, is the session ID. So the way I'm going to get the session ID is actually by consuming the login web service. So I think if I go back up to the table of contents, let's see if I can. Well, anyway, it's actually in this XML page. So if we go back all the way up to the top in this services/WSDL2, and we go look here at the login web service, what we're going to need to do first to get the session ID is to consume the login web service and pass the user ID and our password as the parameters. So to do that, I'm going to go into my process, and first I'm going to create just an empty Dynaform. We don't actually need a Dynaform to fill in anything in this process, but we do need it to be able to assign the trigger as a step. So I'm just going to create this empty Dynaform and name it display role list. And since we don't need anything in this Dynaform, we just can leave it blank. I'm going to just hit save. So now I just have one empty Dynaform named display role list. And so the next thing I'm going to do, which is actually going to allow us to access that web service, is create a trigger. So I'm just going to retrace my step a little bit. So go under the Process Objects toolbox and then hit Triggers. And since I want to create a custom trigger, I'm going to go ahead and click on Create in the upper right-hand corner here. So the title of this trigger is just going to be consume, and if this will let me type, consume internal web service. And then I'm just going to put the name of the web service we're using, which is role list. I'm going to go ahead and leave the description blank. And then I'm going to go down, and where these two buttons are, I'm going to click Open Editor. So now here is where we can write code. And so the first thing we need to do to consume a web service, and this goes for both internal and external web services, is define the client. And the virtual machine is not letting me type. Okay, there we go. So here, to define the client, I'm going to define this PHP variable named client, and I'm going to set that equal to new, where we're going to create a new SOAP client. And to do that, we just hit new space SOAP client. Then I'm going to add my parentheses there. And what we need, the WSDL address we need to create this new SOAP client is going to be this address here where we copy and pasted services/WSDL2. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this URL and then paste it in the editor. Then I'm going to add my semicolon. So that's the first line that we need and to consume pretty much any internal web service. We only need to call the SOAP library functions. There's no need to call an external library or an external PHP file.
Summer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say this, but
it's fine.
So we're in the editor just trying to mimic what you're doing, and we're finding that the keyboard is not mapping the way it needs to. R is an upside down question mark. Is that what I see? Yeah, R equals upside down question mark. And the reason why I'm saying this to you is because when we get to doing the lab, this is just not going to be possible.
Yeah, I understand. Let's take a second and figure out see if we can figure out what the heck is going on. I've never experienced this before, but I'm going to go ahead and see if any other people have experienced it. Do you mind? Let's just hold on a minute and see what we can do.
That would be great, because honestly, I don't think we can move forward at this point.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The character mapping on the keyboard is not correct. Maybe it's maybe figure out within Ubuntu.
Let me go ahead and see if someone else knows what's going on, and let's just pause. And if we can't fix it today, then I guess we're going to have to continue it, because I want you guys to be able to follow along. So I'll be back in a few minutes, and just take your time to figure out what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So guys, when you go up to, sorry, my microphone was up. When you guys go look at this language here, does it say Spanish or English? Okay, maybe they turned me off. And
sorry, I muted you for a second. It says English.
it says English, but it's still not mapping correctly.
This workflow/en/neoclassic/
No,
process.
when you go up, actually it's like way above, not even in the browser. It's actually the Ubuntu where the time is displayed.
Where do we look?
So if you see the time, it says Tuesday 10:10, at least on my screen. And if you look over here at the language,
Okay.
So,
we're switching it to Espanol, we're switching it to English.
Yeah, I actually am using a Spanish keyboard, so.
All right, so let's go back here and then see if that worked. Perfect.
Okay, great. And then let me know at any time if you have any other problems. I don't mind taking a few minutes to see what's happening. So, do you guys need some time to copy or type this code in? I'm going to copy and paste it for you. Oh no, you can't do that because we're using a virtual machine, so never mind.
Yeah. Okay, we're done.
Okay, great. So then the next thing we're going to need to do is define the parameters that we need to consume this web service, which is right now the login web service. So to do that, we're going to define a PHP variable called parameters. And then what we need to do is define an associative array. So here I'm going to type in array, parentheses, and then array. And then here I'm going to enter my first parameter. So if we go back and look at this page, we'll see that the first parameter we need is user ID. So we can either just copy and paste it or write it. I'm going to just go ahead and write it, which is just user ID, all lowercase. And then we're going to type in admin, since that is the user ID of our user here. Then the second parameter we need, as it shows here, is password. So that's the next thing I'm going to type in is password, all lowercase between parentheses. And then our password is going to be admin as well. So those are just the credentials for the user that we use here. So then I'm going to go ahead and close these parentheses and add my semicolon. So we are basically going to use this type of construction every time we use web services. The reason why we're using the login web service is because we need to authenticate ourselves to get the session ID in order to be able to consume the get role list web service. And then here we have our parameters, which are just the login credentials for our administrator user. So the next thing we're going to do is define a variable to store the response that we get. So I'm going to define a PHP variable called response. And then I'm going to type in the client. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the SOAP call function, and make sure you have 2 underscores here before the SOAP call. So that's 2 underscores, not 1, just to be clear. Then I'm going to add my parentheses. And there are two parameters we need for the SOAP call, which is going to be the name of the web service, which here, if we look at the element name, is simply login. So I'm just going to enter login. And we need the parameters that we defined in the line above. So we can just go ahead and write the variable parameters. So then that should be the end of our code. And the last thing that we need is the, a process maker variable to store the value of the PHP response variable. And the reason why I'm going to define this process maker variable is so we can see the value in the debugger. And we'll see how the debugger works in a second. I know I showed you during the Advanced Architect course, but it's always good to review. So this is what my code looks like. And I'm just going to check here to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. I don't see any right now, but Process Maker is going to let me know if something happened. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Apply. And then there's nothing else I need to do to further for this trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. So it's told me the trigger saved successfully. I'm going to go ahead and close out of that window. So the next thing we're going to do is run a case of this process so we can see the values that we get from consuming the login web service in the debugger. So the first thing I'm going to do is assign the steps to this task. And if you recall how to do that, we just click on this task, right click, and then hit steps in the context menu. So here we've got a trigger, which is consume internal web services, and the blank Dynaform we created, which is display role list. So we can go ahead and drag and drop display role list. And then under here, we're going to assign this trigger. So the way I got this menu, again, is I just hit this arrow next to the display role list step, and then it shows me two possible time intervals where I can assign triggers, which is either before the Dynaform or after the Dynaform. So I'm going to go ahead and assign this trigger to go off before the Dynaform.
Click on the plus on the Dynaform. Right there. Yep. Down arrow.
And so this is what the steps are going to look like. I have the display role list, and then there I have the trigger going off before the Dynaform. So now that I've assigned the steps to my task, I'm going to go ahead and click out of this window. And then I'm going to right-click again on the task and then go to Assignment Rules. So here I'm going to, in this search box under Available Users List, I'm going to just search for the admin. And then I'm going to just drag and drop myself into the assigned users list here to assign myself as the admin to this task. So once you've got yourself assigned to this task here, then you can go ahead and hit save to save the assignment rules. And so the very last thing I'm going to do before I can run a case is actually enable the debugger. Now there's two ways to do this, and this first one I'm going to do now is just if you right click on this blank process map here, you can hit edit process. And then if you go down, you'll see this option called debug, and I'm going to go ahead and click in this checkbox. And then I'm going to hit save. So that should enable the debugger, and I'll be able to see the values of my variables if the trigger went off successfully in the debugger when I run a case. So now we can finally run a case. So I'm going to go from the designer and click on Home in the top menu here. Then I'm going to go to the new case option under the cases menu. And then I'm going to go to web service, which is the process that we just created. And if I double click, it's going to open my new case. So here, since our Dynaform is blank, I'm not going to see anything here, but what I'm interested in is actually what I get in this debugger here. So here, well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead. We have two tabs here, one for variables and one for triggers.
Yeah, we don't see the debugger. We see steps. We see everything except for next step on the right-hand side. We see case number 2.
Did you enable the debugger with me, or did you miss that part?
Yeah, we did it.
You did enable the debugger? Okay. I wonder if...
We're going to double check, yes. So right click. The debugger is checked, yes.
Okay. Interesting. It might be the size of your screen. Do you think it's being cut off by any chance?
Yeah.
One of the things that I do is I actually, I have my Zoom on 90%.
Yes, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So if we have the code all correctly, which in my case, I was able to type in without a typo. Well, actually, I was saying before that we have two tabs up here. We have the variables and the triggers. So if we just go ahead and click on triggers quickly, this green here means that it went off fine. Sometimes if you have an error, it won't show you anything at all. But normally it also shows you red.
It's probably what we have. We don't see anything on the triggers, but we see stuff on the variables.
Okay, so I'm guessing that if you have you won't have the response variable here, right?
Under triggers?
Yeah, no, under variables, sorry. If you click on the variables tab, it shows you a list of all the variables in the process. And here, since my trigger went off correctly, it has response. So do you guys get an error message at the bottom by any chance? Or just, if it shows up nothing in triggers, then you've probably got a typo in the code.
One second, Summer. Did you put the response equals at response equals response? And then we save that, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back to that. Let's see. Let's go back to designer. Designer, yeah.
Here, I'm going to show you the code I wrote in again, too, just in case. Because that's kind of like, that happens to me a lot, too. I'll forget a semicolon and spend like a half hour figuring out what happened. I'm going to try to zoom in my screen. Hopefully, you'll be able to see a little bit better. But I zoom it out so you guys can see the whole thing.
Thank you. I want to do a comparison of that.
Yeah, hopefully it's a little bit bigger for you guys now.
Much better.
Okay, just send to me. Copy paste, send it through to the go to the mini chat back.
This is 2.
What?
2. This course?
It is cool.
Okay. Looks exactly the same.
Maybe you can try starting a new case.
Yeah, that sounds good.
because sometimes I also have kind of funny problems with the virtual machine as well. And I'm gonna send this zoom back to 90. Otherwise, the thing is, like, the reason why I have the zoom at 90 is because sometimes the buttons get cut off in Process Maker, and then you can't exit out of something. So I suggest you guys do the same as well. And then another tip that you can do while you're on the virtual machine is actually, I'm going to apply that. So another thing you can do is when you look at the process map and if you get stuff cut off like menus, like this process objects menu here is kind of cut off at the bottom. You can also change the zoom of the process map as well. Actually, that didn't fix the process objects problem, but we can also.
Yeah, new case didn't.
But anyway. Well, if you guys, you'll be doing a lab for the internal web services as well. So if you guys still have a problem doing that lab, then
we can look at it. Okay, good.
Yeah, and you can also try to. So I'm going to go back to my draft.
No email.
I just email him.
And the same code is actually in the lab too. So if you wanted to test it over again, you can also just substitute the parameters and change those around. So let's move on.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, so here we get the response. So here it's telling me the status code is 0, and I can actually scoot this up a little bit so I can see it better here in this screen. So here it's telling me the status code is 0, and that means that there wasn't my trigger was executed successfully. So if the status code is 1, 2, or 3, or another number, that means there's some kind of error. So like for example, maybe the credentials expired for that particular user, or the username doesn't exist, something like that. It would give you a number other than 0 here. And so the next thing that we care about is in this message. And here we got this giant long message that's a bunch of numbers and letters, and that's actually the session ID that we're going to need to consume the role list web service. So that's what we're going to do now, is move on and start consuming that role list web service. So I'm going to go back to my process, go back into the designer, and go into the triggers, and then I'm going to edit the trigger that I've already made. So I'm going to just add another line of code, which is going to read a session ID. So I'm going to here I'm defining a variable that will store the session ID that we just got from that message in our response from the login web service. And since the first part of the code doesn't really work for you guys for now, the second part probably won't work either. But like I said before, you can test it out in the lab and see what's going on, because you're going to do the same thing in the lab as well. So if we go back to so here, just to remind you, if we go look at this role list again, then the only parameter we need is the session ID, which is what we got, which here it says was obtained during login. And so we got that from consuming the login web service that is shown here. So what I'm going to do now, since we've already defined the client, we're going to go ahead and define the parameters for our second web service. So here I've got parameters, and I'm going to redefine the parameters after it consumes the login web service. another associative array here. So I've got array parentheses, and then I'm going to go ahead and enter the name of the web service we're consuming, or sorry, the name of the parameter that we need, which is session ID. And then we're going to get that from the session ID variable that we just defined in the line above. Then I'm going to close the parentheses, close the second parentheses, and add my semicolon. So then we're also going to define the response as well, or define a variable to store the response. So here it's basically going to be the same as this line here. We've got response equals client, then a double underscore, SOAP call, and then role list, then the parameters that we defined in the line above. So role list is the name of the web service we're consuming, and we need the parameters we defined in this line above here, which is line number 8. So then I've got my semicolon. And then the last thing I'm going to do is move this line of code down. So we don't want our process maker response variable to hold the response from this chunk of code here. We want it to store the response from this web service here, which is the role list web service. So I'm going to double check, make sure everything's okay. Okay, I think that should be good, and then I'm going to hit save. So I'm going to exit out of here and then go back to the draft that I made of the process I just created. So I'm going to go ahead, double click here. And so this time what I get in my response variable is the list of roles in Process Maker, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So if I go ahead and expand this up here, so I get the UID. So here first it shows the UID of the role and the name of the role. So here this is the GUID of the admin role, and then the name of that role, of course, is processmaker_admin. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to do when you guys come back from the lab is how to store these values in a table. So what we're going to do now is head back to Process Maker University, and I'm going to stop this from loading. We're going to do this first lab here, using internal web services to create a new Process Maker user. So I think I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes to do that lab. The code is already in there for you guys to copy and paste, and hopefully that will help you find out what went wrong when you're following along with me. No, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I've done this so many times that but I used to, yeah, oh man, just all the times I've forgotten one semicolon. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes to complete this lab. If you have any problems at all, let me know. I'm going to mute my computer. So I'm going to see you guys in about 20 minutes.
So we're working this lab together.
Yeah.
You want to?
I might not be wearing my headphones, so if you have a question I don't respond, you can send it over to me through the chat function. So I think 20 minutes is about 10:55, so.
Hello. Hello.
Hey guys, are you ready to come back?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
As I mentioned, he probably does not be here.
Oh, that's fine. Okay,
Can I say regarding, but while we were going over the exercises, we had a bit of a problem connecting to the PM database tables.
a database table.
The PM databases, yeah.
Let me
So,
see. Is that part of the first lab?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see where it is. Were you able to log in, or what was the problem? Because I don't see.
so I mean, so when we made a drop down for the roles and we did the select statement for it, we didn't really get any results. And when we went into admin and looked up the PM tables, we
Uh-huh.
didn't see any.
So there's no data inside.
And this is for the lab for using internal web services?
Yeah. First lab.
Okay.
Maybe we can figure out later if you want.
Yeah. Because I'm not seeing a. Yeah, I'm gonna have to table that for now.
Okay.
And then while you guys are doing the second lab, then just for the sake of time, I'm going to get back to that later because we are a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to external web services. So let me show you the website that we're going to use an external web service from, which is here. So if we go down back to the main page of the developer course and we go under web services, we're going to click on this. Sorry?
I can't see the screen. We can't see the screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I paused it over break. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a lab you guys just did using internal web services to create a new process maker user. And I'm on the developer course main page right now. So if you are on the lab, you can just go back here. And so what we're going to be doing now is using an external web service. So if we click on this second lab here saying using external web services, then well, first I'm going to click no, so I could go back to the first page. And we are going to be using, I think that was on this, that's on the second page. We're going to be using this web address for our external web services. So if I copy and paste this here, and then put it in a new tab, we'll see a list of all of the web services that we can consume from this page. So basically these web services are basically all for countries. So it gives you a list of continents, a list of countries. The list of countries is something you guys are going to do in the external web services lab. And you can also get a list of continents, what I'm going to show you for an example is getting a country ISO code by the name of the country. So if I go down here, this is the web service I'm going to show you, which is called country ISO code. So to use this web service, we're going to create a new process, just like we did for the internal web services. So if I go back into the first thing I wanted to show you before we go to web services is I created a grid here to show you the list of roles that we got from the internal web service. I'm sorry, this is the first thing I was going to show you. I got distracted. But here we get the list of all of the roles that we got in this table here. So the way I did that was in the process, I added a grid to the blank Dynaform that we had created earlier here. And then here I added a grid. And so in this grid, I created the variable grid. The ID is just grid. The title is roles. And I set the display mode to disabled. And then I added 2 text boxes to this grid. So what I did is I went up to the web controls, dragged and dropped those. And then when I click on these text boxes, I set the ID to GUID, which is part of the response we get from the role list web service. And so the label of this text box is role UID, just to give us an idea of what this column should hold. I also set the column width to 50. So this is kind of also a short review of grids. This column width is 50 because we have 2 columns and we're trying to get a total of 100 to fill up the entire row of the grid with these 2 columns. And we'll see how that works. But the most important thing to remember is that this ID here is GUID, and that's how we're going to store the GUID given to us by the response of the role list web service into this column here. And so we also got a name back from that web service, which was called just name. So then I changed the label of this column to role name, and I also set the column width to 50. So if I preview this grid, so I've got 2 columns, one called role UID and one called role name, and they take up this entire row because their column widths of 50 add up to 100. And so when I go back and I look at a case of the process, I get, oh yeah, I also had to add a loop to the trigger. So I'm going to just go back to the process and look at my trigger. I edited this. I'll open the editor and I'm going to zoom in for you guys so you can just see the code a little bit better. So here I created a loop. So starting with I equals 1, and then so for each role in our response, so I'm storing each role in the array as a role in this variable. So then from those roles, we're going to take the GUID and store it in the GUID column here. We're going to take the name from the response and then store it in the name column. Then here we go through each row of the grid with our loop. And then here we are going through each iteration or each row here through our loop until we get to go through all of them. So that's just a short overview of the loop here. And that's the only thing I added. So then I'm going to have to zoom out here because all of those buttons are cut off. Back to 90%. I'm going to save that trigger, and then when I go back and open a case of the process, then all of those roles are listed in that grid. And let me know if you want me to send you that code maybe in an email or something, if you think it will be useful, because I know I didn't give you guys enough time to copy it down. Or you can also go through the recordings as well. So then here I've got every role stored in a row of the grid with the role UID in this column and the role name in this column. And that gives us a nicer presentation of the information we got back from the web service without having to sort of read over this ugly looking response here in the debugger. So now I'm going to move on to external web services. So I just showed you the web services that are available from the website we're going to use in the lab. And for my example, which is different from the lab that you're going to be doing, is that I'm going to be using this external web service here, country ISO code, and the parameter we're going to need to consume this country ISO code web service is country name here. And so we're basically going to do the same thing that we did for the internal web service. So I'm going to go ahead and design a new process. So now I'm back in Process Maker and I'm going to click on Designer up here in the top menu. And then I'm going to hit New to create a new web service. So I'm going to name this one External Web Service Get Country ISO. And I'm going to leave the description blank, set it to no category, and hit Create here. I'm going to press quit out of this little tutorial, and I'm going to just create a simple one-task process like we did for the internal web service. So here I'm going to just name this task Get Country ISO. And so the first thing I'm going to do now that I've got my process is create a new Dynaform. So I'm going to go ahead, hit Dynaforms in the Process Objects menu, and then click on Create. So this title, I'm just going to name it Get, or maybe Enter Country, since that's what we're going to do here. And then I'm going to hit Save and Open because I'm actually going to want to add something to this Dynaform. I'm not going to leave it blank this time. So here I'm going to hit Save and Open, and it's going to take me to the Dynaform Designer. So the only thing, well, we're going to add two things to this Dynaform. The first thing is a text box. So I'm going to go ahead and from the Web Controls menu, I'm going to drag and drop a text box web control onto the designer, and I'm going to create a variable called country. And that's going to store the country that we're going to enter in this text box. Then I'm also going to click on the text box and then change the label to country. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a submit button because that's pretty much all we need to do for this text box. Yep, all we need to do is add a submit button now. And I'm just going to change the label of the submit button to Get Country ISO. And I'm just going to double check in my country web control to make sure that my variable is named country, because I'm going to need this. I'm going to need this for my trigger. So I'm going to hit save just in case, even though it auto-saved. Oh, and it's telling me my changes. Okay, there we go. So saved my Dynaform, and then the next thing I can do is create my trigger. So basically I'm going to do the same thing I did for the internal web service. So here I'm in triggers. Since I'm going to create my own custom trigger, I'm going to hit create here in the upper right corner. And then I'm going to name this trigger Get Country ISO. We're not too creative. And so I'm going to open the code editor here, and I'm going to try to zoom in. Hopefully it won't cut it off, just to show you, better show you guys what I'm entering. So the first line of code, like usual, is defining our client. So we're going to create a PHP variable called client, and then like usual, we're going to declare a new SOAP client. So here I've got my parentheses and quotation marks, as well as my semicolon, just to make sure I don't forget later. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this web address into those quotation marks in my trigger. And so that's all I need to do to define my SOAP client. For pretty much every case of using your consuming a web service, you're just going to need this URL as the only parameter there. So the next thing we're going to do is define our parameters. And so if we remember from the web service we're using, which is country ISO code, we need just one parameter, which is country name. So I'm going to go back here, and since we always use an associative array, I'm going to do that here, and then first should be the name of the parameter, which is just country name. And I'm actually going to use a single quotation instead. And then, so from there, to get the country name, we're going to get that from the country variable that we created earlier when we were adding a text box to the Dynaform. So I'm going to go ahead and add those, close those two parentheses. Make sure I didn't mess anything up. Make sure that's the same. Yep, country name with C and N in capitals. And then I'm going to go and define our response variable. So we've got response equals the client. Then we're going to add a double underscore with SOAP call. And I keep on writing soup for some reason. And then, so here we're going to have to add the name of the web, or the name of the web service we're consuming, which is just country ISO code. And I'm going to go ahead and actually copy and paste just to make sure I've got all of the capital letters correct. So there we got the country ISO code, and the next thing we need are our parameters. And so the next thing we're going to do is just define a process maker variable so we can see the value of the response, the PHP response variable in the debugger. Make sure we've got all of our semicolons at the end of each line. Everything has the right capital letters. Everything spelled correctly. Okay, that should be good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm going to have to zoom out now. Otherwise that button will be hidden. And I'm going to hit apply. And then save. So that should be the part with our trigger. And so the next thing I'm going to do is try to start a new case. So before that, I'm going to have to add the Dynaform as a step. So Just to go and retrace my steps a little, I'm going to right-click on this task and then choose Steps from the context menu. So then we have our Dynaform, enter country. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as the first task, and then set the trigger to go off after the Dynaform. Actually, I'm going to also assign it before assignment, just in case. So we've got our steps. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that window, and then I'm going to have to assign myself to this task as well so I can start a case. And remember from the architect course, the person who's assigned to the first task in the case are the people who can start a new case. And then I'm going to enable the debugger. So I'm going to right click on the blank space in the process map, go to edit process, and then check debug. And then hit save. So now I'm ready to start a new case. So I'm going to go to the home page. And then I'm going to go to new case and then double click on external web service. So here I'm going to enter a country. So I'm going to do United States as an example. And then I'm going to hit Get Country ISO. Since my trigger, so if I go here and I click on the Triggers tab, I can see that the execution of my trigger went off fine.
Nothing.
Okay, and then when I look at the value of my response variable, I can see I got the country US ISO code correctly. So for the United States, it's just the ISO code is simply US. So I'm going to just go ahead and go back and try it with another country. So I can just, to go back to the Dynaform, I can just hit steps in the upper left-hand side under the home option in the top menu. And I'm just going to change the country. Maybe I'll do Spain this time. Then I'm going to hit Get Country ISO again. And then we can see now we got the ISO code for Spain, which is ES. And that actually is pretty much all we need to know about consuming internal and external web services. So if I go back to my designer, I'm just going to reiterate what I've been saying at the beginning of this morning, is that when you consume an internal or external web service, you're just going to need 3 lines of code: the client, the parameters, and the response. So up here in the client, the only parameter we need when we call the SOAP client function is just the WSDL address of the web services that we're going to be consuming. Then in the parameters, we're going to define an array that's full of the parameters we need to consume this web service, which in this case was a parameter called sCountryName, and the value of that we got from our country process maker variable. So then here we've just got a variable to store the response we got from that web service. So here we've got client, and then we have the parameters for the SOAP call function, which is just the name of the web service that you're consuming, which in this case was country ISO code, along with the parameters that we declared in this line here. And so this line is pretty much optional, but you're pretty much going to always want to create a process maker variable to store the values of these PHP variables to be able to see that in the debugger. So just something I might have mentioned in the architect course is when you're doing these triggers, it's always a really good idea just to declare random process maker variables within the trigger. So if there's something wrong with your trigger, you know at what point that error occurred. by the value of the variables that you've been setting in your trigger. That's just a tip when you write your own triggers. So here I'm just going to click Save, and we're actually ready to do the External Web Services lab now. Do you guys have any questions about External Web Services before the lab?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes to do this lab, maybe long. I might actually need a half hour because this one's a little bit more complex than the example I showed you. And if you need help at any time, let me know. I don't always wear my headset when you guys do the lab, but you can always ask me the question over the lab, or sorry, over the chat function, or and then either tell me to put on my headset or just ask the question directly. And so you guys were having a problem making a connection to the database, or what was the problem?
I just show nothing. Only
It just shows nothing in your lab.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at what point in your Dynaform? Or just it shows nothing in your Dynaform. Okay, let me see. And you guys copy and pasted the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there shouldn't be a problem with the code at all. And in the debugger, it also shows nothing.
Yeah, so nothing.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Let me try to figure out what could have gone wrong. Hopefully the external web service will work for you. Another thing I want to show you before we continue on to the external web service lab is that since this lab is a little bit more complex because you're going to be autofilling a drop-down box, there's actually another parameter that you need to fill in. Let me show you, and I'm going to pause my screen on that just to make sure. I'm trying to remember which page this was on. So it's probably on the first page. Yeah, it's before this. So you're going to be designing a Dynaform, and this is what I want you guys to pay attention to, is in the properties of the drop-down control that you're going to be adding to the Dynaform, you're going to need to change the properties in the properties panel like so. And it shows you an image here with a red box around it, so hopefully that will make it clear, but if it's not, you can always ask me. So I'm going to give you guys, well, I'm going to check in with you and see, well, when we get, let me see what I want to do. I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes, so that will be at 12:05. We'll come back, and I'm going to try to troubleshoot the first lab and see what happens with me. Okay. So how does that sound? At 12:05, I'll check back in with you guys.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yep.
Thank you.
Problem. Hey guys, just checking in. How's the lab going?
Yeah, we finished.
You finished? Were you able to get it to work?
Yeah, it's working. Yeah.
Great. So I went over and did the first lab myself, and I got it to work. So I have two theories as to why yours didn't work. So I'm just going to go through that quickly before we get on to plugin development. So let me see here. create user. So one of the things that you needed to do, because were you guys able to get the roles to show up in the role dropdown?
No, actually, no.
Yeah, so that's so did you guys add the SQL query here?
Yeah,
And
we did. We did.
you did? Interesting.
Yeah.
And the database connections PM database, I wonder.
Let me
Because
check.
that should show up. And if you go into the Dynaform preview, let's do that together. That would be really strange because since you guys added that, and then so when you click on the role, are you guys in your Dynaform?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you click on the role web control, is the variable role as well?
Let me see. Yeah.
Okay, so in the preview, it should show you so it shows me all the roles in the drop down. And so if you go into your preview, it doesn't show up for you guys. Okay,
Yeah,
it does show up.
they didn't show.
Oh, it didn't show up. Okay. So I wonder, so if you double check your SQL query, do you have the RBAC roles as a plural? Because that might, and let me zoom in.
Yeah, it's match. It is.
It's exactly the same.
It is come from the PM database, right?
Yeah, exactly. There should only be one database.
But when I check the PM database from the admin, it's showing empty, nothing in the PM database. That problem?
Where are you talking about the database connection? Or,
Yeah.
and it shows nothing in the database connection.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be your problem. Sorry?
Where did this table come from? It's come from
It's from roles.
Oh, I see.
RBAC roles, it should be called. So that's the that should be the name of the table.
See.
And do you guys have the login for the database? The username is root and the password is just process maker with a capital P and the capital M.
Okay.
So I'm just going to show you quick where that table is located just for your reference.
Okay.
So it should be under here, WF workflow. And we're going to have to look at this big panel because it won't show up in the list because there's too many. Yeah, so it's from this table here, RBAC roles.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the database connection has to be PM database. So if it shows nothing, are you able to click on maybe ellipses and choose the database?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, so if you click on the role web control here and you can see it, well, if you can see, I know it might be kind of small, is that I have these dotted outlines. And then when you go into the properties here, then if you scroll to the bottom under database connection, it should show PM database.
Yeah, it is a PM database. Yeah.
And then the SQL query, it shows up as well.
Yeah.
And then the variable is role as well. And it should be role, because if your SQL query shows up, then it should be the same.
Yeah, exactly the same. It's kind of,
And then is the ID and the label the same?
yeah, label part doesn't matter. Most important is the ID.
Oh, the
ID
label, yeah, it doesn't matter. You're right. And then even if you click on preview at this point, nothing shows up in this drop down.
Yeah, empty.
It's empty. I really couldn't tell you what the problem would be.
Yeah, it's kind of hard, I know that. We can probably something small thing, I think. But we got it. We got what's going on.
Oh, what happened?
No, I don't know. We don't want to start here, but probably the entire process we already understand it, so we don't want to spend much time on this thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's yeah, that's a mystery to me right now.
Yeah, like it's a simple thing, but
yeah, and I can't go into your computer. Like you could share the screen, but I don't want to spend too much time here. But yeah, it's really a shame we have to use the virtual machine. I'm there with you where I don't like it, but there's no alternative. Otherwise, I'd just be able to log into your workspace and figure it out. But I think we're going to just move on from there. Like even the drop down should show something. Like that shouldn't be that bad. Like if you have time, I would double check the SQL query just to make sure all of the letters, everything has to be capitalized. Make sure everything's exactly the same. That's the only thing at this point I can think of.
The case is matter? I don't think the case is matter, right?
I think it does matter. Like you should just try and make sure everything is capitalized, because I've had problems with that where if something isn't capitalized, I would just make sure everything's capitalized to be 100% sure it isn't that. Because the PHP is really picky about that. Because I've had a capital I in my PHP. I know this is SQL though.
Yeah.
Because I think also the name of the table is also all in capitals. So I don't know how picky SQL is about that.
Yeah, let me check if it's actually in the capitalized. So I never use capitalized for no.
Oracle doesn't really care, but the other ones do. So.
Are you guys troubleshooting or waiting for me? I couldn't hear you clearly. Sorry?
We are waiting for you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, let's move on. Hopefully you guys can figure it out. I really wish I could go in and see what the matter is. That's what I would normally do. Because I've gone through everything I can think of. So let's move on to plugin development, and hopefully we won't run into too many problems here since we're going to work with the command line. So let's just go to the plugin development wiki page. And let's see, here I'm going to just click on the documentation main page. So if you just click on documentation in the bookmarks, then you'll get to this main page here. Then if we go to developer info in this top menu under PM programming, we can see plugin development as option number 4. at the very end. So again, I'm at wiki.processmaker.com. I clicked on developer info in the top menu, and I'm going to hit plugin development as number 4. So here I've got the overview. So what we're going to have to do is the first thing we're going to do is set up the Gulliver script. And you guys have probably never heard of Gulliver before. It's a PHP development framework where that basically was built to develop Process Maker. So and so we're going to be using this as Gulliver script to create a new plugin, and we can use Gulliver to create new menu options with our plugin, new process maker functions, and our own trigger wizards as a few of the examples. But we can also do more than that as well. So if we go into Process Maker University, again, which is here, I'm going to just go ahead and click on it and go back. The developer course. So we're going to start in the basic plugin development section, and the first thing we're going to be doing is setting up the Gulliver script. So before you guys get to the lab, I'm also going to just show you exactly how to set up the Gulliver script, and you can also navigate back to the wiki page in the case you prefer written instructions in the future. So now I'm going to show you where the Gulliver folder is located. So if we go up in the activities, we'll get this menu, and I'm going to click on the file manager here. And it's going to show us eventually all of the files we have in our installation, and well, in this virtual machine, and eventually in our Process Maker installation. So I'm going to go from home to computer under devices, and then I'm going to go to this folder called OPT and double click here. And then I'm going to go to the Process Maker folder here. And so here we'll see the Gulliver folder, which contains basically all the files we need to run the Gulliver script. And the Gulliver folder can be found with each installation of Process Maker, and that makes it unnecessary to download any external files to install Gulliver. So basically, Gulliver should already be installed on your own Process Maker instance. So if we open up Gulliver and go to the bin folder, we can see here the code that makes up the Gulliver script. And so the script, since the script cannot be executed from the bin folder, we're going to have to create a symbolic link from the Process Maker engine so the Gulliver file can be executed inside of Process Maker. So to create our symbolic link, what we're going to have to do is open the terminal. So if we go back up to Activities, and we go to the terminal here. So here we'll open up our terminal. So if you're not already familiar with Ubuntu, the first thing we're gonna want to do is make ourselves the super user. And we know that we're not the super user yet because we have this $sign here. So to make ourselves the super user, we can enter sudo su like this. And then we're going to enter the password for Process Maker, which is just Process Maker with a capital P and a capital M. And it kind of sucks you can't see the words that you type in, so you just have to trust that you did it right. So then we're just going to navigate to our installation folder, which is located at OPT. So now we're there. And if we open it up, and to open it, we can use the double L here. In the case you don't know, we can see our Process Maker folder, which is our the Process Maker directly. So we're going to navigate there, CD Process Maker, So now we're in Process Maker, and if we open this folder up with a double L again, then we can see all of the files we have in the Process Maker folder. And down here, we can also see the workflow folder. And that's just the folder we're going to be working in, and that's where the Process Maker engine is located. So I'm going to also, so to navigate to the engine, I'm going to first navigate to Workflow. We open that up, we see our engine right here. And then I'm going to navigate to the engine. So now we know we're in the engine because we see the extension right here, right before our pound sign. And this pound sign indicates that we're the super user. So now that we're finally in the engine folder, we can create our symbolic link so that we can execute the Gulliver script in our Process Maker engine. So what we need to do to create the symbolic link is enter this line of code or text into the terminal. So first we're going to write in ln -s opt. So this is going to be the location of the Gulliver script. So it's opt/processmaker/Gulliver/bin/Gulliver. So if we press enter, it doesn't really show us anything, but we can see if it worked by opening the engine folder. So if you just press LL again and open it, you should be able to see Gulliver in light blue here. And if you can't see clearly, let me know and I can try. Well, I can't zoom in here, unfortunately. But here is Gulliver. It's in light blue. And if you're following along, hopefully it's light blue for you too. And so if the symbolic link fails, it's actually going to show up in black. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you what happens. And just a quick tip, if you don't already know, is if you press the up and down arrow, it will show you the code you've already entered in the terminal. So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm just going to add two to the end of this file path here, and since Gulliver 2 doesn't exist, it's going to give me a problem. So I pressed enter, I'm back in the engine, I'm going to open up the engine, and we see here that since Gulliver 2 does not exist, the symbolic link wasn't really, there's a problem with the symbolic link, and it indicates that by highlighting everything in black and all of the letters are in red. So now I'm just going to get rid of that faulty symbolic link. So remove -f Gulliver 2. And so if I open up the engine folder again, then that bad symbolic link is gone. So now I have that symbolic link. What I can do now is I can execute the Gulliver script from the engine. So here, now that I did that, I can see all of the functions that are available in using the Gulliver script. So here, we're going to be using this new plugin function later. Once we've finished configuring everything in our plugin, we're going to pack it to be able to install it in Process Maker. And tomorrow, we'll also build a crude file to be able to write and create a database table, as well as edit it and read it, update it, and delete it. And then and it comes with all of these other functions. But the only one we really care about right now is the new plugin function. So now that we've set up the Gulliver script, we're actually ready to do the lab. And hopefully it should be a short lab for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and give you 5 minutes to complete the lab because we are almost at the end of our time. So if you go back to Process Maker University and you go back under the developer course, you'll see under basic plugin development, the first lab is setting up the Gulliver script. So if you guys, can you take 5 minutes to do that? And I'm going to check in with you at 12:30 and let me know if you need a few more minutes or whatever. So just take the next 5 minutes to complete this setting up the Gulliver script lab. Hey, are you guys, how is the lab going?
We finished.
Okay, great. So I know you guys started a little later. Do you guys want to go on for another 15 minutes or just end it here?
I think we can end up here today.
Okay, great.
Right.
And there's something else I just wanted to mention is that if you want to do and try to get the internal web services lab to work, this is actually one of the labs, this section, external and internal web services, you don't need the virtual machine for. So I suggest trying it on your own installation, or if you still have access to the training server. That might have expired for you guys. I'm not sure. But you don't actually need the virtual machine for these two. It's for the plugin development that we need the source code and everything. So if you guys want to just try it on your own installation, or if you still have access to a separate testing server, then you can do that as well. That's something I suggest, because I do get really funky issues sometimes with the virtual machine that I haven't seen on the cloud before. So. Or outside of the virtual machine. So, okay, I'll see you guys at the same time tomorrow.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, yep, yeah. And don't hesitate to email me if you're working through it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay, see you.
Yep, bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.